be open to experience, be willing to try new things, don't have a rigid plan, accept random acts of hospitality without judgment or fear. Don't be afraid to wander, don't be afraid to eat a bad meal. You know, if you don't risk the bad meal, you'll never get the magical one. But I think most important, you know, be humble, be grateful. Be aware of the fact that you are probably the stupidest person in the room. As far as you are the least prepared, least equipped person to know who's really in charge and what's really going on. I think I maybe before I started traveling, I thought that the human race as a whole were, you know, could and would turn on itself at any moment, you know, venal, petty, cruel, arbitrary. And it's true that all of those things exist in this world, but I meet mostly pretty nice people doing the best they can, often under very, very difficult conditions. I met a lot of very nice people who've done very, very bad things that conflict with my deeply held conceptions of justice or sexual equality or acceptable practice or religious views. A lot of gray areas in travel. But I think that on balance, the world is filled with people doing the best they can, you know, who love their kids and, you know, would like to, you know, put on a clean shirt every morning and live their lives with a little dignity and have access to food and water, hope, just like everybody else. Uninhibited creative freedom is something that I've been incredibly fortunate to have for the better part of my entire television career. Unlike anyone else I know of in television, I've been free to do whatever I want, to make the shows I want, anywhere I want, with whom I want, in any style I want. So at first I don't know any other way, and by now I won't have it any other way. Life is good. Why settle for less? And by the same token, when you're given that much freedom and you have essentially no interference and nothing but support behind you, what you don't want to do is get lazy and bored and sloppy. To me, I'd much rather not make TV at all, or make even unsuccessful TV, than make competent television. You know, it's very easy to make a conventional travel or food show at this point. It's like shooting porn. It's the same shot sequence and the same sort of limited terminology. You know how all of the little pieces work, where you have to start and where you have to end. I detest competent, workmanlike storytelling, and I'm always very, you know, the times that we do that, I'm very unhappy with that. I'd rather fail. No, I've been fired many times. In my cooking career, I've been fired a number of times. I was not a particularly good chef. I had a lot of problems at various points in my career with narcotics. I was very deservedly fired on a number of occasions. But I mean, if you're talking about failure, you know, I accepted failure as a chef because I was at various times a bad chef and even a bad person. These days, if I fail, it's because I tried to do something and did not succeed, or I just was not able to do what I hoped to do or wanted to do. Or maybe I tried to do something that just clearly, in retrospect, didn't work. But I would much rather that. I would much rather fail gloriously than not venture, not try. I'm not as I said before, I'm not interested in competent, telling stories with competence. I'm looking to tell them with some style and originality and some creativity that is interesting to me and the people I work with. And there have been times that has resulted in failure, meaning it didn't work, it didn't communicate anything like what I wanted to. Often the story I think I'm going to get ends up being another story entirely that's even better or very different. That's good. But there were other times where I just failed miserably. You know, I tried to do a Sicily show again, and it was not good. It did not capture the place. It didn't show us anything of value. It did not live up to the subtlety and beauty of its subject. And then there are shows where, you know, some people are just going to hate it. They just don't like the style. They think it's self-indulgent. They don't get it. But that's the kind of failure I like. You know, a powerful reaction one way or the other is infinitely preferable to me than pleasing everybody. If I walk in a room where everybody agrees with me, I find that frightening and dismaying and boring as fuck. My answer to that question stems from my history as an addict. A lot of other addicts looked in the mirror every day and did not see somebody worth saving. Even at my worst, there was a level of vanity, I guess. I looked in the mirror and saw somebody deep in there, regardless of how low I was, my circumstances. I had a high enough opinion of myself that I thought it's worth going forward. I think a lot of people in a similar situation, for whatever reason, look in the mirror and see somebody bad, unworthy of good things, and allow themselves or excuse a downward spiral because they don't really believe in their basic worth. I did, you know, so that's vanity. I think it's the same drive that allows me to tell stories in books and on TV. Because let's face it, anybody who writes a book or goes on TV with the notion that they have a story worth telling that people might want to listen to, you're really already, by definition now, a sort of an aberrant personality and a monster of self-regard. This is a very unreasonable attitude. I have a story that you will want to listen to for 10 minutes. Why would any reasonable, and I might make a living doing that. Some of you might even want to pay for that story, to the point that I could make a living doing that rather than washing dishes or preparing meals. That's not normal. That takes something, and I don't know whether that's, you know, that's often very much at odds with you know, being a functioning, well-rounded, good person in the conventional sense. That kind of vanity, narcissism, self-regard, self-importance, and cheerful willingness to examine your and share your feelings. You know, I think Fran Lebowitz said at one point, you know, if you're sharing your feelings, you know, that's not sharing, that's leaking. When that book came out, it was immediately a bestseller, and it changed my life overnight. Overnight. I mean, I was desperately in debt, hadn't paid my rent in time ever, had owed Amex for 10 years without making a single payment, owed the IRS, hadn't even filed, was in very, very, very insecure place at age 44. Suddenly, people were offering me things and offering me opportunities. And I think if I did, I was old enough and I fucked up enough already that I just said, you know, I realized this is a lucky break, was unlikely to get another, so I made very careful choices in that environment, was very determined to not fuck up. I didn't go for easy money, I didn't grab the first thing, I did not give Food Network the show they wanted. And I said no a lot to what seemed like a lot of money. Well, look, what's good for you in the short run is not necessarily good for you in the long run. you know, you're starting out as a writer, you've written one book, and you got a TV show, and somebody offers you $1 million to, you know, represent an anti-diarrhea medication. Well, that's a lot of money in the short run, but you're always going to be that guy with the shits. I'm admittedly, I have very contradictory impulses here. I'm old school in a lot of ways. I think you should at least know how to make a beef bourguignon correctly according to the original recipe. To the degree that anything can be authentic, you should know how to, you know, some dishes, to me, like a cacio e pepe or you know, traditional Italian pastas, I get really pissy if people riff on them. You know, you put chicken in a carbonara, you lost me. It's unforgivable sin against God. But on the other hand, you know, there are guys that came out of blues and R&B who turned out to be Jimi Hendrix. You know, there are people who can riff on and improvise on classics and create whole new wonderful worlds. And what is authentic is mostly meaningless anyway. I mean, the tomato is not authentic Italian. I mean, it came from the New World. Chinese food is always evolving, so it's protective and instinctively hostile to new as I can be. I know too many really creative chefs, and I understand the changing world. Is it pleasurable, I guess, is the benchmark for me. If you're gonna mess with a classic, are you making something more dazzling that says, look at me and how smart I am? Or are you in some way improving it? Is it pleasurable? Is a chicken Caesar more pleasurable than a plain Caesar? I think not. I think the chicken takes away, but that's my opinion. I'm relentlessly, pathologically punctual. I think that comes from all those years as a chef and more importantly as a cook. You know, if you showed up late as a cook, you're letting your people down in a very tangible way. Somebody else has to physically do the work, do the setup, or you lose the shift, or you get fired. As a chef, cooks who showed up late, who were disorganized, who couldn't keep a lot of stuff going on in their heads, they failed. And when they failed, we all went down with them. So I am a relentlessly, you know, possibly even unhealthily, you know, anal retentive, you know, obsessive compulsive, you know, clean up after when I'm cooking, I'm cleaning up after myself constantly. I keep things organized. I write lists. I keep my schedule up to date. I am never late. And as part of that, if I say to you, I'm going to meet you tomorrow at, you know, 12 minutes after 5 to see John Wick 7, I will be there at, you know, 5:02, hanging out across the street, discreetly observing to see what time you show up. And I'll be making some very important decisions based on your arrival time. It's a curse and a blessing. But I think everything important I ever learned, I learned as a dishwasher and as a cook. You show up on time, you organize, you stay organized, you clean up after yourself, you think about the people you work with, you respect the people you work with, and like I said, you do the best you can.